right? So it is autumn here in Pittsburgh now. The last week, there's been a clear shift. The mornings are cold. I need a jacket when I take the dogs for a walk. It's dark later in the morning. And the change in seasons is just a really easily apprehensible sense of impermanence, right? We can look out, we can see that there's summer into fall, we can anticipate fall into winter. It's very easy to intellectually understand and to physically experience that the weather and the seasons are transitory. They are real, but they are impermanent. It's a really good way to begin understanding impermanence. This is a very broad seasonal shift. It's also very easy then to see in the diurnal cycle that things change, right? Obviously, it's there's no question that night becomes day and day becomes night, and that these are there is a reality to the day and a reality to the night, but they are part of a process that is always changing, always different. The sun is always moving through the sky. The moon is always revolving around the earth. Beneath that level, it gets a little bit harder, right? It's still intellectually very easy to understand that me right now, late morning, is different from me that woke up 6 or 7 hours ago. My body is different. I've eaten, I've had coffee. I can intellectually understand that I am a different state. I'm a different set of emotions and feelings. But it isn't immediately apparent that that means that myself is as impermanent as the weather or the seasons, right? Intellectually, it's not a difficult ask to understand that, of course, the sensations and the phenomena that I'm experiencing right now are different from the sensations and phenomena that I experienced when I first got out of bed. But that doesn't lead as directly to the experience of the self as a changing sequence as it does when I look out the window and I can see that it's cloudy and autumnal. And I can understand, well, of course, the seasons change, right? There is no set in stone weather that is permanent. There is weather that changes. The same way there are sensations through the day that evolve and change. They are real. As I'm sitting here, I am Andrew talking to YouTube. Earlier, I was Andrew buying coffee at Starbucks. Both of those are real, but they obviously, when I put it that way, they're obviously not permanent, right? And the scrutiny of that changing self yields this sort of openness of process, right? And so when we meditate, when we practice equanimity, right, the Shine calm abiding equanimity. Again, if you're in Pittsburgh at 8:30 in the morning on Saturdays, stop by Homo Ling, where I'm teaching that very foundational calm abiding practice. But the reason to aspire towards a mind of equanimity is so that that undistracted mind can start to perceive in ever increasing granularity the windows of change. Right? It doesn't take a whole lot of equanimity to understand that here in the middle of October, the weather is different from what it was 3 months ago. But it takes a bit more granularity to recognize that my thoughts have changed in the 10 minutes that I've been sitting here. Right? You need to be non-distracted in order to be able to turn that attention onto the thoughts and the phenomena, to recognize the arising of thought, and most importantly, to recognize when the thought has become captivating and to return to the object of attention, which in this practice is is the breath. So the breath is really awesome because it's kind of the pivot point between the large, broad, external sense of change and the internal sense of change, the internal process, the internal impermanence of the self. The breath is really the linchpin. We breathe in, we breathe out, we interface. I was listening to a podcast this morning before I went out with Joseph Goldstein. And I love Uncle Joe. Never met him, but I still feel like I can call him Uncle Joe. I've listened to his voice for so many hundreds of hours. But he was talking about a scientific paper he had read where physicists were examining the shift in state of an electron in the atom. And he said that the unit of measurement of time that they used to capture that shift in state is called an attosecond, which is a billionth of a second. And that's the level that, I mean, I don't know what the Planck constant is, but there's a point where if you examine, you get to the little fabric, you cannot go any more precise, and it's got to be close to that, right? I'll talk about the Planck constant in meditation in another video because I'm writing a short story, the premise of which is as the observers look further and further into time in the past and further into time in the moment, when the observer observes the furthest reach of observable time, because distance is time, and the most granular Planck constant, when the observer can experience that, they turn into a black hole. Anyway, so that's a short story to come. But, okay, so what Joseph Goldstein said was that the relationship between the attosecond and a second is the same as the relationship between a blink of the eye and 10 billion years. 10 billion years, right? The universe is, 15 billion years old. I mean, how can we look at our bodies and our experiences and expect permanence when look, I'm not saying that quantum physics and meditation are saying the same thing, but they are kind of saying the same thing, right? So anyway, from the breath inwards, as our equanimity matures, stabilizes, the focus point, the area that we can focus on becomes more and more precise. So at first, as we sit, and in a 10-minute session, maybe every 3 minutes, you recognize, oh, I've been distracted. 3 or 4 times during 10 minutes, you return to the breath, because at first, we really are perpetually off kilter. The natural state of the mind is to be wandering. So we bring it in. But then maybe there's a minute or two at a time where we're stable and aware of the breath. And then maybe within that, a couple of times a minute, we can really be clear, oh, that's a thought. No, that's an emotion. That's a sensation. That's an interpretation. That's a story that I'm telling. This is not an experience, it's a story. And we can do that a few times a minute, and then maybe 100 times a minute, so a few times a second. No, right? Then maybe down to an attosecond. Perhaps the Buddha, in an enlightened state of perfect equanimity, is aware of change in state at the attosecond. I mean, that's pretty beautiful. But to come back up and then to the breath, and we focus on the breath, because at first it is a suitable level of granularity to maintain attention. If I can take a breath in and a breath out, and have not been consumed with the pizza dough that I need to make later this afternoon, or the music I want to write later today, or any of the anxiety that comes along with the work day. If I can do that, what else is there except to do that again? And then to do it and be aware of ever increasing details and granularity. And the mind of equanimity, in a sense, is a tool that can be applied to the nature of self. And the mind of equanimity begins with avoiding distraction. And that begins with recognizing distraction and coming back to the point. So then the body, as we sit, has the same kind of relationship to my thoughts as the city of Pittsburgh does to the weather. It was raining a few minutes ago. It's not raining right now. It wasn't raining 2 hours ago. It will rain again. The weather and Pittsburgh are in a dynamic relationship that nobody would say, this is the weather, and point to the window right now and say, that is unchanging. So, that's how I would put it. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, keep your wits about you, and I'll be putting out another video soon.